Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We're broadcasting throughout the United Kingdom and around the world, bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on YouTube, broadcasting on Facebook, on Twitter, and on TikTok simultaneously. And what a 48 hours it's just been with all the shenanigans going on at Westminster. We're going to be talking about that tonight. Please do send in your comments. Tell us what you think's going on. Tell us what you'd like to see happen. And we'll read out your comments and we'll give you a shout out. Please also tell us where you are viewing from and we'll give you a shout out as well. This is a pro-UK programme. We're for the Union. We're for staying together. We love the United Kingdom. That doesn't mean necessarily that we love our politicians, but we love the fact of unity and solidarity within our British Isles. And we'll stick it to the politicians if the politicians deserve that. What's on your mind this evening, folks? Please do tell us. Let's read out some comments. Debbie says, good evening all. Nice to see Debbie and Frankie and Adam in the house. And also to Harry Brown says, good evening AFFG and Unionists. Robert Keating says, we need the next Prime Minister to arrest Sturgeon and her corrupt lot. Well, that would be a sight to see, wouldn't it? Hello, good evening to Tommy and to David Gray, who says, the man's back, the warrior bold. That's a nice comment. Good stuff, David. Robert says, shut down Holyrood. And Kenny Calder, viewing from East Kilbride, says, evening, guys. Good. And Steve Robert Cairns there says, good evening from Galashiels. Good to see you, Robert. Hope that you're well. And Steve Clark from Montrose, good evening to you. And to Eric, good evening. Fellow Brits throughout the United Kingdom and around the world. And also to Linda. Hello, Linda, and good evening to you. Send us in your comments, folks, about what you think's happening in Westminster. We'll get to that in a moment. Good evening to Christopher, and a wonderful Unionist evening to our nationalist friends as well. And I hope that they're having a great British week in the great United Kingdom. And to Catherine, good evening to you, Catherine. Now, goodness me, all this carry on in Westminster, you know, it's really remarkable when you think about it that the British cabinet system, I mean, you couldn't run a business like this. How can you run a country with this? I mean, consider if you were running a business and, you know, you want somebody to be the forklift driver, for example, in the warehouse. You need to know, has that person passed his forklift driver's test? Okay. You need to know that he knows his way around the warehouse. But apparently, if you want to become the cabinet minister on health, Northern Ireland, defence, whatever, I mean, what's your qualifications? You know, oh, I happen to get elected by 30% of the vote in Upper Snodsbury. And somehow that makes me qualified to be, you know, name it, the health secretary or whatever. How about IT? The IT secretary. Do you know anything about IT, sir? Well, I've got a computer. You've got a computer, all right. And do you know what to do with that? Well, you know, I can send emails, I can receive emails, I can delete emails, I can click, I can double click. You know, it's like the old scene from the IT Crowd. So they make you manager of IT because you know what a computer is. And that's like how British government, and I'm not criticising Boris Johnson per se. It's been running like this for a while. You become a cabinet minister just by dint of being elected in your constituency. And if you happen to know somebody who, oh, my sister's a nurse, all right, well, we'll put you down now as the health secretary. I mean, that's what it basically amounts to. And then when you're in the job, it's not like you're contracted for the 5-year parliament. It's like, oh, you just go in there and do what you can. And if I don't like what you're doing, we'll fire you. And if you don't like your job, you can resign. I mean, it's all just ridiculous. I mean, say you were to be made, for example, Defence Secretary. If I was to be made Defence Secretary, right, okay, I'm going to be, right, this is a very serious job. I'm basically going to live in my office. I'll put a camp bed up in the corner and I'll sleep night and day in the office so that I'm there at 7 o'clock in the morning and I can be there all through the night if necessary. And that's, I would look at it like that. This is a 5-year job. I'm getting paid tens of thousands a year for doing this. I'm going to dedicate myself. I'm going to learn everything there is to know about the defence industry and about the defence mechanisms of the country and commit to it entirely. But you get the impression these people, they just get elected as a cabinet minister and it's just like another job for them, and they just dilly-dally and then they get fed up with it, or somebody annoys them and they go, I'm resigning, and they're flouncing out the door again. You cannot run a business like that. If you are going to put people in certain roles, they need to know everything about that role, or they need to commit themselves to learning, and you need to give them the chance, a full 5 years, to prove themselves. But what we've had in the United Kingdom, going way back, is nothing that comes close to that kind of degree of commitment to the cause. And so we peons look at Westminster and all we see is the cabinet falling out with each other, jobs going around like a carousel, and nobody committing to doing their job for a full term, and being able just to resign willy-nilly when they feel like it because somebody's upset them for some reason. I mean, I don't see how you can run a country like that. And Britain is in a mess right now. There's no question about that. And we as Unionists can point that out. We have to point that out. But is one of the reasons this slightly, almost like antiquated cabinet system that we've got. I mean, if somebody's got a better idea, please tell me. But I was making some wee notes before I came in today, and if I was Prime Minister and if I was appointing you to a cabinet role, there's 4 things I would ensure, right? The first, you should only be appointed to a cabinet role if you have direct experience in that field. And you know what you're doing in that field, okay? There's no time for you to learn all about, the defence industry. There's no time for you to figure out what's happening in Northern Ireland. You already need to know it if you're going to be appointed to that. And if you don't have anybody that knows what they're doing, then bring in somebody from the House of Lords. Appoint somebody to the House of Lords and bring them in, okay? Oh, but that's not democratic. Well, I mean, as I say, all of these cabinet ministers, they've only been elected by a minority of the vote in their constituencies. It's not like they're some great democratic icon. They only probably just scraped in democratically in their home county seat or something like that. So that's the first thing. You've got to have somebody who knows what they're doing in that field. Secondly, if you're contracted for that role, just like in any other business, you should be contracted for a set period of time. 5 years is the lifetime of the Parliament, so you should be in there for 5 years. No, you're not going to resign. You're in there for 5 years. 3, if you don't know what you're doing, you should be allowed to bring in people from industry, okay? If you don't have a clue about the economy, then what you do is you bring in the people who write about the economy, whether they're writing for the Daily Telegraph or the Guardian or something like that, and you say, listen, John Smith, I read this fantastic article about the economy which you wrote in the Sunday Telegraph last week. Could you tell me how we're going to make that happen? Okay, you write it out for me and I'll make sure it happens. Okay, so you bring in people like that. And we've got precedent. During the World War II, the Scottish Secretary of State was Tom Johnston. He was a Labour man. He was somewhat of a class warrior. He was very much old school, left wing. But Churchill appointed him to be the Secretary of State for Scotland, and he was reluctant to do it, but he said he would do it if he could bring in everybody around him, including past Secretaries of State, to help him do the role. Okay, so that's another way that's the third thing, that you should be allowed to bring in people to help you if you don't have a clue what you're doing. And fourthly, you should not be able to resign. Or at least resigning should be considered out of order. There should be a presumption that you don't resign, although you can be fired if you're not up to the job, as they say. So that would introduce a degree of stability into British cabinet government, which we simply don't have at the moment. What we've got at the moment is just a complete dog's breakfast. So that's my thoughts. That's my thoughts on British cabinet government. And just because I'm a unionist doesn't mean that I'm looking at the British government and saying, oh, it's all hunky-dory. No. I mean, I don't see how they can have any time to run the country when there's all this nonsense going on. Robert says, they're there for the money, they care not mostly for the public. At the moment there is no party for the people. I've heard people say that, that's for sure. Linda says that she hopes Boris will stay because we need him for getting rid of the SNP. Alan says cabinet ministers should have relevant experience. It's crazy they don't. Yeah. Robert says, I know exactly what Scotland needs, and especially our children. Eric says, I can only think of one cabinet minister, Ben Wallace, who has experience in the field. That's Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, as it happens. Eric says, unfortunately we need a general election to get a government in order. Well, that's probably not going to happen. I think Boris is going to hold off for as long as he possibly can. Scottish nationalist there saying that he wants Boris to stay. Long may he stay because he helps the yes vote, according to a Scottish nationalist there on TikTok. Somebody says there on TikTok, I hope I live long enough to see my children in a free Scotland. Well, we're living in a free Scotland, of course. I don't know what's meant by that. Presumably, she means separated Scotland. Well, you're going to have to live for maybe several thousand years if you believe that Scotland is going to destroy the United Kingdom. That's not happening. We're not going to allow that to happen. Absolutely not. Marcus says, we've had 15 years of SNP corruption. Hard to believe that I was in high school, he says, when they came to power. When I was in high school, the SNP were just regarded as complete cranks, and thankfully they were highly marginalised. I mean, they were complete cranks when I was in high school. But somehow the devolution carry on, the devolution dog's breakfast, as I'm calling it, that gave them an air of legitimacy. And Christopher does make the point here that all of this carry-on in Westminster has taken the focus off the misdemeanours of the SNP, including all the issues that were going on there at Westminster with the SNP Say No More. David, of course, asks if Boris goes, who would lead? Penny Mordaunt or Suella Braverman might be good choices. Well, the only one that is in the cabinet who is what I would call an idealist, or at least somebody who can write and put ideas together is Penny Mordaunt. She's written a book called Greater Britain, which we've got here in the office, but we tried to read it, but it was pretty heavy going. So we only got to the second chapter, but if she becomes Prime Minister, I'll read it. I'll make an effort to read the whole thing. But the point there is that she's got ideas, okay, and she's also got a sensible air about her, which is what you need for government. You can't, no matter how much the whole bonhomie and happy and cheery sort of approach of Boris Johnson might initially have been appealing, it's clear that when you're actually in the serious business of trying to run a country, that approach isn't correct. You need to have a serious demeanour and a serious attitude, because running the country is a very serious business. I don't know about Suella Braverman. I don't know much about her at all, but maybe that's another possibility. And Tommy says, well, what about Jacob Rees-Mogg? There you go. I know some people will support him as well. He's got a certain air of seriousness, I suppose, about him. Indeed. So that's time will tell what happens, but it looks like Boris is going to be staying on. Looks like he's going to be hanging on. So, I was just talking there about Sturgeon and her she's still, of course, going at this anti-UK referendum attempt, and all of this carry on will be helping her. But no doubt she's also wanting Boris just to hang on, because she doesn't want to be bothered with all the hassle of trying to go against somebody who might be even more popular than Boris. So she's probably happy for Boris to hang on, even though she pretends that she wants rid of the lot of them, because of course that goes along with her general attitude. She wants rid not just of the cabinet, she wants rid of everybody else in the United Kingdom. She certainly wants rid of Westminster, London and England in general, if she were to be honest with herself. But isn't it absolutely crazy? Oh, and it's an example of the extent to which devolution was simply not thought through, that here we are today wondering whether or not Nicola Sturgeon seriously has the ability to run a referendum to break up the United Kingdom. I mean, there should be no question that a devolved arm of the British Parliament is not able to destroy the United Kingdom. There should be no question about that. But the fact that that's not even written in law, the fact that you have to even ask a judge for an opinion, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And it speaks to the extent to which the people who set up devolution had no duty of care to the integrity of the United Kingdom. I'm going to say that again. That's a good phrase. They had no duty of care to the United Kingdom, to the integrity of the United Kingdom, to keeping the United Kingdom together. It was like the last thing on their mind. How do we make sure this process does not imperil the UK? Is there any words, is there any sentences that maybe we should write and include in this law, just to make sure that maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, if there's to be a Scottish nationalist government in power at Holyrood, they don't use what they've got in order to break up the United Kingdom? Do you think we should maybe write something like that into the law? Ah, no, don't bother. Don't bother. It's too difficult to think about. Oh my goodness me. Oh my goodness me. It really is utterly crazy. Utterly crazy. And I was reading an article in the Herald a couple of days ago, and Anas Sarwar, who's doing not a bad job at trying to make people excited about the Labour Party again. He's don't have any criticisms of him as such, but apparently he launched Labour's blueprint for the Constitution. Well, Labour's initial blueprint for the Constitution, if you want to call that, the Scotland Act 1998, was of course a disaster for the Constitution, and it set the path that we've been travelling on, and it was exactly these Labour people who did not give proper thought to the potential breakup of the United Kingdom and have brought us to this impasse. Okay, one thing follows the other as night follows day. So anyway, now they've got a new idea for the Constitution, and one of them includes the House of Lords not being reformed, but being replaced. Replaced with what? With a Senate of nations and regions. So what that will mean will be the nations will be Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and the regions will be all the English regions. And how is that an improvement on what we've got at the moment? Now, I'm not saying that the House of Lords doesn't need to be reformed. I can think of quite a few things that you could change in the House of Lords, but scrapping it and replacing it with a Senate made up of elected people from each of these nations and regions of the United Kingdom, all you're doing is you're creating a second chamber which will work to make everything else work, because it will simply, the upper house, as it's called, will become balkanized into the three separate parts. Wales will be heavily Labour, the Scottish section will be heavily SNP, just basically a mirror image of what's in the lower house, what's in the House of Commons. And then what will happen is that the upper house will continually get outvoted, almost to the same proportions that the lower house gets outvoted or makes its votes. And so it will just be another platform for the SNP to be continuously outvoted by the rest of the United Kingdom. It will just be another platform for the SNP to get angry about stuff. It's not going to change anything. An upper house of the nations in direct proportion to the population of the nations, that's just going to end up being some kind of mirror image of the lower house. So that's not a solution, I'm afraid. And that's Gordon Brown. That's his idea, right? That's his big idea. So these ideas are dreamed up by people who don't understand political reality. And if they understand political reality, they can't project their thoughts forward a week or a month or a year to see how it's going to end up. And he also makes a point here. He says, in launching the document, the Scottish Labour leader has claimed that the, quote, the political game playing of recent years has wounded the devolution settlement. No, it's the devolution settlement which has wounded the politics. He's got that exactly the wrong way round. Because, oh, their blessed devolution settlement which must never be changed, which is the ridiculous notion that the Scottish Parliament can do whatever it wants, provided it's not been written down as forbidden. That's the devolution settlement, where in fact, as we always say, it should be the other way around, and the Scottish Parliament should only be able to do that which is written down, and everything else is presumed to be forbidden. So he still needs work. He still needs to understand what's happened to Labour and what's happened to the United Kingdom before he can really come up with the right answers. But he's making an effort. David says here, if the SNP used public money to hold an illegal referendum, would the police who took part as well as returning officers be breaking the law? Would councils who close public schools on the day be breaking the law and be subject to prosecution? How can Scary Poppins blag 20 million of our money as campaign funds and another 40 million to run something that is illegal? Indeed, and if it were to be considered illegal, then all these people would be breaking the law. That's correct. And so the SNP would struggle to get an illegal referendum through, because there would be councils, there would be returning officers who would say, well, I'm not going to get involved in this illegality. But the point that you make there, David, about the 20 million of our money, that's a very serious issue right now. There's 20 million of taxpayers, British taxpayers' money that's being spent, and it's being spent on British civil servants who are preparing a case for Nicola Sturgeon to break up the United Kingdom, and we're paying for that. Again, absolute abysmal disgrace that this is happening, and that the United Kingdom Parliament and that Boris Johnson with an 80-seat majority is not stopping that disgraceful waste of money, our funds being used by his employees, okay, the British civil service, to break up the country. Incredible. Incredible. Now, I just want to talk about our activism, talking about those of us who are trying to hold the United Kingdom together. We had a really good day of activism on Saturday, and we had our street stall in George Square, and I'm just going to fire up some pictures there of it. Let's look at number one. Well, there's our street stall. We call them the Jubilee Street stalls. You won't see this if you're on TikTok. The best viewing experience is at YouTube, UK A Force for Good. But we call these our Jubilee Street stalls. They're running all through the year, and we're flying our AFFG flag, and we're flying the Queen Elizabeth Platinum Jubilee flag. Okay. And there's two of our table team who are absolute stalwarts with these fantastic Scottish and British t-shirts. And don't they just look the part? Don't they? Absolutely fantastic. Big thank you to them as well. They're really seasoned operatives on our table team. So thanks to this couple very much. Okay. There we are. A lot of people were in the square. This is in the morning. The reason there was a lot of people in the square was there was also, as it happened, there was also an orange march, a big orange march, which was passing while we were actually there. Okay. And the stall was busy all the time. For the several hours that we were out, there's always people at the stall taking our magazines, taking our badges, and taking our flags. Okay. And there's another angle of our stall. You can just get a sense of the dynamism of the stall that day. Okay. And there's a close-up of it as well. And finally, this interesting banner was being paraded. It says Burnley says no Irish sea border. Restore UK. That's a pretty good banner, that one, I would say. No Irish sea border. Pendle Sons of Ulster in Burnley. Okay. So folks, if you'd like to join us on our street stalls, just send us a message to contact@aforceforgood.uk and we will stay in touch with you. Okay, now what we were giving away as well was our latest magazine, Union Heart, Happy and Glorious, which is a 12-pager dedicated to the monarchy in Scotland, explaining what it's all about and looking at the advantages, the values, the importance, as well as some of the controversies as well. So that's a really good thing there. And all the pictures were taken by AFFG. All the pictures in this magazine were taken by AFFG. And what's the Queen saying there on the back? She says, I believe that young or old, we have as much to look forward to with confidence and hope as we have to look back on with pride. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? You can get this at our shop at aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. Good. There we go. Okay, so we have a competition coming up, and the competition prize today is a pack of 3 pens. These 3 Union Jack pens that have got a little bobble, a little Big Ben bobble. 3 of them. That's your prize for the competition today, as well as one of these little trolley, Union Jack trolley tokens. Okay, we're going to throw that in as well. So, a not insubstantial prize for a very easy question, which we'll ask you in about 7 or 8 minutes after the On This Day in British History. And the easy to answer it, by the way, if you haven't done it before, you're in with a good chance of winning. All you need to do is to send your answer by email to contact@aforceforgood.uk. contact@aforceforgood.uk. That's how you do the competition. So on this day in British history, a couple of things we could talk about on this day today. The first is the British general, who's a Scottish general, one of the famous generals of the British Army, a man called George Elliot, who is responsible for ensuring that Gibraltar today is in fact British, and British it will remain. He passed away on this day, 6th of July in 1790. And he was born in Roxburghshire. And the Great Siege of Gibraltar was between June 1779 and February 1783, and it was an attempt by Spain and France to capture Gibraltar from the British during the American War of Independence. Because the American War of Independence didn't just include the British and the Americans, it also included other continental powers who were, in a sense, trying to divide. Well, they were looking out for themselves, but they were trying to defeat Britain because they threw their lot in with the Americans. Because, of course, France wanted to be a world power, and it saw Britain as its opponent. So anything it could do to mess up Britain's chances, it was doing. So the French laid siege, along with the Spanish, laid siege to Gibraltar, and the British nobly defended it. And General George Elliot was right up there at the front. He was the Scotsman who led the military action. The largest military action fought during the American War of Independence was, in fact, the Siege of Gibraltar. There's an interesting pub fact for you. So the battle extended outside the bounds of the 13 colonies, as it was at that time. And he of course held out with his men and finally won the day, and that's why Gibraltar today is still British, and British it will remain. And there's a famous painting which we'll put up of George Elliot. There he is on the white horse, and that's John Singleton Copley's painting called The Defeat of the Floating Batteries at Gibraltar in September 1782, and it depicts the defeat of the Spanish during the Great Siege. And George Elliot is on horseback there, and note to the right of the picture the Scotsman in full Highland regalia. That will be one of the Scottish Highland officers, no doubt. And Elliot today is remembered in various ways in Gibraltar, and there's some stamps that were released probably quite a while ago now in Gibraltar that's him. That's him there. And that bottom stamp is a rendition of the painting that you've just seen. So that's General George Elliot, died on this day, 6th of July 1790. One of Scotland's greatest sons. Okay. And the man responsible for the fact that Gibraltar is British. Another notable thing in British history which happened on this day back in 2019 was a Force for Good's thin red line at Ayr. Now, the Scottish nationalists were marching that day. Some of our viewers were with us that day, and we stood up and we certainly kept the British end up as the Scottish nationalists shambled by, shouting and swearing at us. And lying, of course, about their numbers. They claimed they had 13,000 there, but we counted them and there was 2,672 of them. So considerably fewer than what they try to pretend. And in fact, talking about counting numbers, the Scottish nationalists had the Welsh nationalists, I should say, had a march in Wales last Saturday, and they claimed they had 8,000 there, but we were able to count them from video evidence, and there was 1,668 of them. Okay, less than a quarter of what the Welsh nationalists were claiming marched in Wrexham. So they're learning the lying technique, the lying strategy from their compatriots here in Scotland. So basically, whenever a Scottish nationalist or Welsh nationalist claims a certain number, you can always divide that by at least 4, and in some cases you can divide it by 22 times. And in our magazine, 10 Years Strong, which you can also get from our shop, we listed all the counts of the Scottish nationalist marches along with their true figures. Anyway, let's look at some of the photographs from Ayr, which were absolutely excellent. Let's have the first one up. There we go. That's us setting up the thin red line in the Sandgate. Okay, that's quite a cheery picture there of some of our supporters. Okay, behind the banner that says "All for One, One for All," and that's our old website address there. And there's another good picture of some activists behind the banner. That's our tabletop banner. Okay, there you go. That's a colourful picture, isn't it? We've certainly got the best colours, folks. Okay, and that's a good one. That's a good one, taken from I think that must be from an action cam because of the wide angle appearance of it. Okay, so that was on this day as well. That was back in 6th of July 2019, 3 years ago. And of course we were out in Stirling last 2 Saturdays ago now. Gosh, how time flies, with our banner, Bruce to Elizabeth. There we are. Isn't that a beautiful banner? Look at that. Bruce to Elizabeth, our great British monarch. And we held a rally that day, and the Scottish nationalists passed us, and we counted them, and there was 432 of them. But of course they lied, and they said there was 2,000 of them. Again, less than a quarter of what they actually claimed. There was 432 of them. Okay, now we've written an article which is called Bruce to Elizabeth, Our Celebration Rally Part 1. That's on our website, and in that it's essentially basically an article about Robert the Bruce, and it's everything you could possibly want to know about Robert the Bruce in about 1,500 words, and you'll find a link to that in the comment thread on Facebook. We posted that yesterday. We've got another article coming up on the same topic tomorrow, probably. That will get posted. But I was just looking at that article that we posted yesterday, and you know, that's if you've got like children and you want to teach them about Robert the Bruce, you won't find a better article on the internet than that one. And I know we're blowing our own horn here, but that's absolutely a fact. I mean, it's drilled down from the death of the Maid of Norway to when you had the throne vacant, to Robert the Bruce's ancestor claiming it unsuccessfully, to John Balliol, to William Wallace, to the rise of the Bruce, right through to his death in 1500 words. And talk about homeschooling. I mean, you've got everything there that you need to know, including the timeline. So please do check it out. And do consider, like, who knows what they teach children at school these days? It's probably not good. So look to trusted sources where you can actually find good information, and ensure your children have access to those sorts of things. Great stuff. Now, I'm going to ask a question about what I've just been speaking about, and do fire your answer in, please, to contact@aforceforgood.uk. And if you haven't done it before, you're in with a good chance of winning three, not one, not two, but 3 pens and a trolley token, which will be in the post to you tomorrow. And you know what we're going to do as well, because we're feeling generous? We're going to throw in a free copy of Happy and Glorious. A free copy of Happy and Glorious, worth £3.50 normally. Okay, so the question to send to contact@aforceforgood.uk is, on this day, the 6th of July in 2019, in what great British town was a Force for Good holding the British end up? Okay? In what great British town was a Force for Good holding the British end up back on the 6th of July 2019? Fire that in, folks, to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and if you've not done it before, you're in with a good chance of winning. Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, one or two comments here. Paul says, we're a strong brand in the world and quite a major player, a country people want to belong to. Why else would people keep coming here? Absolutely, you know, this is the positive stuff, and Paul's great at the positivity. But I was reading a horrible article in the Herald newspaper yesterday, which I'm not even going to talk about, other than to say it was really, really negative. And the person was saying, oh, you know, unionism offers nothing. Unionism offers the United Kingdom, the greatest country in the world. Okay, that's what it offers, for starters. How can that be nothing? You know, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. The things they get up to. And talking about the UK, right, in the same, was it the same newspaper? Yes, it was the same newspaper. The front page, ditching Trident could scupper Sturgeon's plans to rejoin the EU. Now, this was some defence expert saying that she couldn't join the EU if Scotland was separated because the EU wants you to have nuclear weapons, blah, 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 whatever. I don't know how right or wrong that is. It's not really a consideration. What I was annoyed about was this so-called expert. He kept talking about if Scotland was independent. He kept talking about the United Kingdom, as in what would the rest of the United Kingdom do if Scotland was independent. And he mentions like something, the disarmament of the UK against the latter's wishes. He talks about by making the UK dependent, blah, 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 and was blah, 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 supported by the UK. In other words, he's imagining that the United Kingdom is still going to exist if Sturgeon destroys it. Doesn't he realise that the union of the United Kingdom, the essence of it, is the Scotland-England union? If you break that, you don't have a United Kingdom anymore. Do you even have a rest of the United Kingdom? Do you even have a remainder of the United Kingdom? Only on certain definitions, okay? And what you would have would not be staying together for very long after the main union had been destroyed. Okay, so this guy might be a defence expert, but he knows nothing about the Constitution, because he imagines that there's going to be some kind of thing called the United Kingdom, which is still going to exist when the very union that makes up the United Kingdom is no longer there. And there's so many people like that. They've yet to make the leap which helps them to realise the importance of this issue, how deep this issue goes. They've yet to make that jump in their minds before they suddenly realise, oh my goodness me, it's the end of the United Kingdom. They've yet to realise the severity of that. But when they do, then hopefully, they'll jump into action. Certainly everybody who watches our programme understands the severity of what we're dealing with, and really what it means for everybody throughout the United Kingdom. Because regardless of what these politicians keep telling you, the United Kingdom has become much more than just a voluntary union of nations that decide to get along. It has over time become a nation in and of itself, with a life in and of itself, with an integrity, with a being in and of itself. Much more than a union of nations, actually a nation of unions. And there was another point which was made, which I wanted to bring up when I was researching for this programme, was this chap writing in the Daily Telegraph called Philip Johnston. And he's an intelligent fellow, and I very often never find anything that I would disagree with them on except this one. He's one of these people who thinks that, do you know what, we just need to give Sturgeon her referendum and she'll lose it, and that'll shut her up. Okay, so he actually says that let her have the referendum and send the separatists packing once and for all. Well, there's so much wrong with that. One of the things that he perhaps misunderstands is that referendums and elections and competitions and so on, they're not necessarily won by who's got the best ideas. They're won by who's got the loudest voice, who's got the power to be heard, and who's got the power to keep being heard day in, day out, day in, day out. Okay? So just because you've got a good idea doesn't mean you should risk it, because you might not have the power at the end of the day. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, imagine if there were to be another one and we won it. Do you think that's going to send her packing? Of course not. Of course not. It would only send her packing if we won by a greater margin than last time. But if we won by a closer margin than last time, then it's game on for referendum 3. So the only way to stop this is essentially to defeat the SNP at the ballot box, not at a referendum, at the ballot box, to marginalise them again. That's a long-term process, but that's how you do it. But the good news is that Sturgeon is putting herself into a corner at the moment. Okay, it's very unlikely she will be able to have a referendum between now and 2024. It's almost impossible, actually, even with the timeline of legislation. It's very unlikely she'd be able to pull one off in time. So she's not going to have one. So she's going to make the election in 2024, the general election in 2024, the big issue. However, what happens if she performs extremely badly at that? So it's an opportunity for us to knock her out at that election, to ensure that she gets less votes than she's ever had before, to ensure that she gets a minority of the votes. She might get quite a few first past the post seats, but if it can be a if they can be won by fewer people in Scotland than ever before, if she can have the lowest actual electoral turnout than ever before, then she's going to be in trouble, and their party is going to be in trouble. So it's an opportunity for us to knock her out at the ballot box at the British general election. That's what we must put our efforts into doing. Ross says, why would he want to teach his child about Robert the Bruce? Well, because he's a great Scottish and British hero, and we were speaking about that in at the event as well, and we'll touch on that in our second article. During the 19th and early 20th century, Bruce was considered to be one of the pantheon of British heroes. You know, he was one of the fighters for British liberty. So it's really only recently that the Scottish nationalists have really tried to take his memory and really turn it heavily into a Scottish nationalist thing, whereas you can just as easily look at his past and portray him as a freedom fighter for the liberty that the British stand for. Yes, I agree here. Marcus says no more concessions for the separatists. Kenny says, what happens if there's an early general election? Can she use that? Well, if there were to be an early general election, then she would, I'm sure, try to say, vote for us. We're standing on one topic only. Yes, she could certainly do that if she wanted. Paul says, the lesson of history is that the British always survive. Even when things look dark, we always come through, don't we just? And often with flying colours. And Rita says, history is certainly a lot better than sex surveys. That's right. If it would be good if our children were to learn history in school and not be getting all this strange perversion forced upon them. Stuart says, good evening, Alistair, love your weekly programme. Thank you, Stuart, and love the letter to say you're not getting a section 30. She needs put back in her box and posted out to Outer Mongolia. Well, poor old Outer Mongolians, if she landed up there. That would be a terrible thing to inflict upon Outer Mongolia. They would think, what have we done to deserve this? And no doubt she'd start dividing the Outer Mongolians. It's like, where's Inner Mongolia? Do we have a conflict with Inner Mongolia? Are we, oh no, can we have a referendum to get further away from Inner Mongolia? No doubt she'd find, what are the divisive lines? How can we make them worse? She's just got that mentality, unfortunately, whereas we've got a healing mentality. We're trying to bring things together, not divide them in half. Catherine says, just had a visitor and ended up arguing about the United Kingdom. I'm sorry to hear that, Catherine. I hope your visitor went away a wiser person. Derek, good old Derek, great show, Alistair. Thank you, Derek. Well, thank you for all the work that you do, Derek. Paul says, half of Europe emerged from communism in the 1980s. Took that long, that's right. And 2/3 from Nazism in 1944-45. I'd say the Brits were very blessed because we had neither. got to keep an eye on our politicians at all times, though, because whether they're in Holyrood or whether they're in Westminster, they will try to overreach themselves. And we saw that in the last couple of years as well. And so it's up to us, the people, to stand up for British liberty, to be the Robert the Bruces of today, to ensure that our politicians can't bind us in the things that they try to put upon us, some of which are problematical. Yes, this is how we frame it, Rita. We frame it as the breakup of the UK, not independence for Scotland. Because Scotland is free right now, you know. It's there's nothing you can't do in Scotland that you can't also do in England. And read Union Heart. It will tell you everything that you need to know. And you get these at our shop. And we always punt the stuff because we do depend upon merchandise sales a lot. So thanks for your support, Paul. "10 years strong and also do more together." And also, somebody's asking, what's that little badge that you're wearing? This wee badge here is our... Let me take it off. Our Union Heart badge. And if you want one of them, you can go to the shop and purchase it, and we'll also add in a free copy for you of Happy and Glorious. So that'll be an £8.50 package that you can get for a £5. Brilliant. We've got all the activist stuff that you need in the shop, including links to t-shirts. Now we have a winner. Our question to you was, on this auspicious day in the 6th of July in 2019, a force for good was holding the British end up in which great British town? And the answer was Ayr, where we revealed the lies of the Scottish nationalists. And the winner is Chris Farron. Congratulations, Chris. Well done. Tomorrow you will be getting this packet of 3 pens winging its way to you. You will be getting a Union Jack trolley token, and you will also be getting free of charge our magazine Happy and Glorious. Please, Chris, could you send your address? Use that same email and send your address to us, and that will be in the post for close of play tomorrow afternoon. Tommy says he's now going to watch the English ladies in the Euros. Good stuff. Thanks for watching, Tommy. Derek says, well done, Chris. Stuart says, congratulations, Chris, well done. Catherine says, well done. Congratulations, Chris. And Tommy says, congratulations. Good stuff. Excellent stuff. Folks, it's the top of the hour. We're going to be back next week. We've got a guest next week a very interesting guest who will be coming on at 7:30. Looking forward to that very much. So we'll be back next Wednesday. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for watching. God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen. See you next week.